He always came home late on Wednesdays. Faculty colloquium, he'd say, tossing his briefcase by the door like a man too burdened by academic brilliance to remember dinner plans. I used to believe him. I believed a lot of things about Malcolm Pierce, chair of the literature department, tenured at 41, published in every major journal, keynote speaker at 4 conferences in 2 years. A man with a mind like fire and a tongue sharp enough to cut through any debate. If you've ever stayed silent just long enough to gather your strength, like, subscribe, and share, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about strategy. And what happens when the silent wife holds the receipt for every lie. But intelligence can't cover stench. I first noticed it in spring. His phone tilted away at dinner, a perfume that didn't belong, a name I heard once in passing. Elena. 22, maybe 23. A graduate student with big eyes and mediocre prose. He called her gifted. I called her a cliché. I didn't confront him. I recorded him. That night, I accessed our home server, where all his research drafts lived. Found early versions of Elena's thesis, strangely identical to a rejected dissertation Malcolm submitted under another student's name 10 years ago. My heart didn't break. It steeled. I printed everything. Created folders. Dates. Copies. Because Malcolm thought tenure made him untouchable. But I was married to him for 16 years. I knew exactly where the cracks were. In academia, reputation isn't just currency, it's armor. And Malcolm had worn his like a second skin for years. But when you live behind borrowed brilliance, all it takes is one tug to peel it off. I spent 3 nights comparing Elena's thesis with a dissertation Malcolm had supervised in 2012, the one that was rejected for lacking originality. But it wasn't lacking. It had simply been shelved. Now its bones wore a new skin, and its name was Elena's. Every paragraph was a ghost. I traced the metadata. Elena's thesis draft had originated from Malcolm's university login. The timestamp aligned with spring break. She hadn't even written the first draft. He had. That's when it all came together. The affair, the ghostwriting, the publishing credits he'd added his name to. It wasn't love. It was leverage. I created a dossier. Not just the plagiarism, but expense reports showing Malcolm used departmental funds for mentorship dinners at boutique hotels. Emails subtly coercing Elena into submission, disguised as praise. And the kicker? A grant proposal submitted to a private donor using plagiarized work as its foundation. It was no longer just cheating. It was fraud. I handed everything to the university's internal ethics board, anonymously. But before they could act, I sent copies to one more recipient. The Chronicle of Higher Education. By the time Malcolm got home Thursday night, the story was live. Respected professor accused of plagiarism, fraud, and improper relationship with grad student. He dropped his phone. Looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman before him. I thought you didn't care anymore, he whispered. I smiled. I stopped caring about you, but not about your lies. He taught young minds how to write. I taught the world how to read the truth. Universities protect their own. That's what they say. But they only protect the idea of themselves. Once a scandal cracks the veneer, they don't circle the wagons, they build a bonfire and toss the body in before the media asks too many questions. Malcolm was that body now. Within 48 hours of the article, the university launched a formal review. His classes were reassigned, pending investigation. Students whispered in the halls. Faculty avoided eye contact. And Elena? She stopped showing up altogether. I heard she withdrew from the program. Smart girl, just a little late. I watched from a distance. I didn't gloat. I planned. See, tenure is supposed to be ironclad. But Malcolm forgot the one clause that could nullify it instantly: moral and academic misconduct resulting in institutional liability. and I had built a case that would make any board tremble. My final move was surgical. I sent an anonymous package to the private donor who had funded Malcolm's recent research. In it, a copy of the grant proposal, the plagiarized thesis comparison, and the proof that their name had funded fraud. The donor pulled out.
Publicly.
That's when the university moved to terminate. Malcolm tried to fight, claimed he was the victim of a smear campaign, that his wife, me, was unstable, vindictive. But they didn't listen. They reviewed the data, the timestamps, the ethics violations, the forged citations, his long history of mentorship meetings that always skirted the line. They revoked his tenure, effective immediately. And that night, as he packed his office in a cardboard box, I emailed one more recipient, a federal investigator for academic grant fraud. He used to lecture about power, persuasion, and prose. Now he'll learn what it means to be footnoted in a federal case.
He still thought he could salvage something.
Malcolm boarded a flight to Chicago that Friday, suited in defiance, prepared to speak at the Midwestern Literary Scholars Conference, a place where tenure once meant applause and his name opened doors. He didn't realize yet how far the rot had spread. That's the thing about public disgrace. It doesn't knock. It arrives mid-sentence. I knew the keynote slot had been stripped, but I didn't tell him. The board sent the email to his university account. He'd already been locked out. When he showed up, program in hand, expecting a podium, he found his name replaced. No explanation. Just an empty smile from the organizer who once begged him for a guest lecture. But the real blow came after the session break. A panel titled, Academic Integrity and the Myth of the Untouchable Scholar. Malcolm's face on the opening slide. Screenshots of his published work next to the plagiarized drafts. Even the grant proposal, redacted and damning. The speaker was Jason Denton, a former colleague who'd once lost a position because Malcolm claimed Jason lacked the polish to lead. Now Jason led a lecture that deconstructed Malcolm's empire piece by fraudulent piece. He sat in the back row. I watched it online. He didn't storm out. He didn't defend himself. He just sat, stone still, like a man watching the replay of a life unravel. Because that's what it was. By the time he got home, a formal investigation had opened into the federal misuse of academic grant funds. I'd waited to file it until after the conference. Timing is everything. Especially when humiliation needs just a little more seasoning. The indictment arrived 3 weeks later.
Mailschlot.
Manila envelope. Quiet thud. Malcolm opened it at the kitchen counter, where he used to lecture me on the responsibilities of academic legacy. Now, he was being summoned to court to explain a different kind of legacy: embezzlement, academic fraud, sexual coercion under institutional power, and breach of federal grant terms. He didn't speak. Just sank into the chair like he'd aged 30 years in one morning. He looked across the table at me, not with hate, with disbelief. Like he'd only now begun to realize I was not the woman who waited up with tea and silence. I was the one who built the records, drew the map, and handed the shovel to his grave. I trusted you, he said. You did, I replied. That's why I won. He didn't try to apologize. It wouldn't have mattered. The university erased him from faculty listings. The publishers retracted his papers. Elena ghosted him. His colleagues distanced themselves like he was contagious. And now the courts had their turn. I filed for divorce the following Monday. No contest. No negotiation. The house was mine. My name had been on the mortgage alone since before his career began. I let him keep the books. The printed ones, anyway. I already owned the story. And that's what this was, a story. A long, bitter novel about betrayal, with a twist ending no one saw coming. Especially not the man who mistook my silence for submission. Thank you for watching this story of cold revenge and poetic justice. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe every betrayal deserves its own ending. And sometimes, the woman he thought would crumble is the one who writes the final draft.